The Trump administration has been desperately searching for a rationale for the US's strikes on Iran. These strikes and military intervention are already extremely unpopular, including with Trump's own MAGA base. So they're searching hard for a reason to justify why the US would intervene in this conflict. And the reason they've apparently settled on is blaming Iran's culture, blaming Iran's predominantly Muslim religion, blaming the cultural practices around women's headwear, and privately, behind closed doors, reports coming in from the military suggest that we're blaming this on a holy war in blatant violation of the separation of church and state. Trump's administration and its allies in Congress and the military have their work cut out for them in terms of justifying this war to the American public. For starters, Trump repeatedly contradicts himself about everything concerning Iran. Last year, he said that the US and Israel's strikes had taken out Iran's capability to develop nuclear weapons. Now, Trump is saying that they could be developing nuclear weapons any day now, which is why we had to strike them. Trump also said that this isn't a war and it'll only take a few days, but then he immediately contradicted himself and said it could take weeks, months, who knows how long it will take. He said that this wouldn't come at a cost to Americans, and in the same breath, said that Americans will have to die as part of this operation. And so, for other members of Trump's administration, as well as people like Mike Johnson in Congress, and they're returning to a playbook they used in previous conflicts in the Middle East, especially in the Iraq War.
The largest state sponsor of terrorism, Iran and its proxies, have killed more Americans than any other terrorist regime on earth. They are dedicated to it. They have been, and they say the quiet parts out loud. They wanted to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, and they'd like to take us out as well. We're the great Satan in their analogy and their misguided religion, and there was no way to appease them. In defiance of every American president since Jimmy Carter, the Iranian regime has pursued the means to acquire a nuclear weapon so that they could take that madness and that ideology to its full conclusion. Everyone, regardless of political affiliation, should be able to agree that that can never happen, should never happen.
So we have Mike Johnson here saying that, first and foremost, people in Iran hate America and they want to see us all bombed into oblivion because of their Muslim religion. He's also saying that because of this, they can never be allowed to have the capacity to build nuclear weapons, even though Trump said we already destroyed those capabilities with our and Israel's strikes last year. So, what exactly is the truth? Or is this just a tactic we've heard used time and time again? Oh my gosh, they're building a weapon. They could destroy all of us. So we have to go over there and destroy them first. That's the same story we've heard from the US military over the past few decades, and it's never worked out well for us. It's led to needless deaths, needless devastation, billions of dollars in military funding that could have been spent elsewhere, human rights abuses, and further unrest in these countries. We're going in there and claiming that we can make it better for the Iranian people, while at the exact same time demonizing the entire country and everyone who lives there to create the justification for bombing them indiscriminately. US and Israeli weapons have already killed over 1,000 Iranian civilians this week, according to human rights watchdogs, including a number of school children who were just trying to get an education. But in addition to that, this idea that the Iranian majority religion precludes this notion of we have to attack them first before they attack us, well, that's kind of at odds with what's allegedly happening inside the US military right now. Reports to a military watchdog organization allege that US commanders are invoking Christian nationalism as the reason for this war, suggesting that it's actually Christian ideology that is promoting violence against our opponents so that we can jumpstart Armageddon and see Jesus Christ return to earth. If that sounds like lunacy and a blatant violation of the separation of church and state, That's because it is. This report from TRT World says more than 200 complaints allege military commanders framed US strikes on Iran as part of a biblical prophecy, invoking the book of Revelation and describing Trump as divinely anointed, according to the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. A lot of people in the United States aren't actively Christian, nor do they necessarily believe any of this. A lot of people don't believe in biblical prophecies or that we need to go to war with people in other parts of the world so that Jesus can come back to earth. Even though I was raised Catholic, I think this kind of stuff is absolutely ridiculous and has no place in a civilized society. I also find it deeply ironic and insulting that we're accusing the Iranian people of having some sort of nonsensical hatred of the US when the reality is that that's a projection. According to reports like these, it's actually people in the US military who have some nonsensical, bigoted hatred of people in the Middle East based on their interpretation of the Bible. And you have to remember who has the most power in this situation, who has the most advanced weaponry, who has nuclear capabilities, who has the bombs, who has the manpower, who has the money. The US and Israel compose some of the largest military stockpile in the world, some of the most advanced weaponry, some of the most violent outcomes are from our strikes, not our opponents in the Middle East. We're the ones who kill the most people. We're the ones who kill the most civilians, and we're the ones pushing this violent narrative about Christian nationalism. So, this military watchdog group is called the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. Its current president, Mikey Weinstein, is a former Air Force officer and legal counsel with the Ronald Reagan White House. So, he comes from a conservative background. And he says MAGA has destroyed the barrier between church and state in the Pentagon as well as in the country at large. He said, quote, their approved solution is to be straight, white, Christian, and male. And that's bad enough when you find Christian nationalism in elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges, legislatures, the cops, the firefighters, the sewage workers. But when you find it where all the nuclear weapons are, and laser guided weapons and drones, it is an absolute threat, an immediate threat, not a shift, but an immediate threat to the national security of our country and the world. So, over the past week, the MRFF has received hundreds of complaints, and some of these complaints represent dozens of military personnel within one complaint. TRT World reports that American service members across every branch of the military have been told by commanders that the US Israeli war on Iran is intended to induce the biblical end times, or Armageddon. A non commissioned officer said in one complaint, this morning, our commander opened up the combat readiness status briefing by urging us to not be afraid as to what is happening with our combat operations in Iran right now. He urged us to tell our troops that this was all part of God's divine plan, and he specifically referenced numerous citations out of the book of Revelation referring to Armageddon and the imminent return of Jesus Christ. That officer said he wrote this message on behalf of himself and 15 other members of his unit, most of whom he said are Christians. This was just one complaint out of 200. And that same officer said that his commander further told their unit that Trump has been anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his return on Earth. He had a big grin on his face when he said all of this, which made his message seem even more crazy. Our commander would probably be described as a Christian first supporter. He has been this way for a very long time and makes it clear that he desires all of us under him to become just like him as a Christian. But what he did this morning was so toxic and over the line that it shocked many of us in attendance at the ops readiness briefing. The Pentagon hadn't responded to any requests for comment sent by the time of publication. But these religious overtones aren't just happening behind closed doors within military operations, they're also being broadcast live. You have people in the highest positions of government speaking to the public about how Iran's religion is apparently so terrible, but ours is apparently so great. This is a lot of the rationale behind why the US so heavily supports Israel. And this type of religious rhetoric is regularly used by people like Netanyahu to justify Israel's attacks against their neighbors, like Palestinians in Gaza, which has been described by independent authorities as a genocide. So, time and time again, you hear these Western authorities rely on religious messaging to justify mass attacks of violence that kill dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of civilians. And supposedly that's because they're the bad guys. But we're the ones killing them. And none of this is keeping Americans safe either. It's creating the justification for retaliatory attacks, some of which have already killed US service members this week. So, no, provoking war in Iran is not keeping our country safe from hypothetical nuclear weapons. It's putting all of us in danger right now, both civilians in Iran, service members from the US, and also civilians in the US, because now we're provoking more retaliatory attacks that could hit close to home. And we're doing it under the banner of this supposed holy war that most of us don't even believe in and never signed up to be part of. We're not all evangelical Christians. Our lives should not be dictated by the beliefs of another religion that we're not supposed to have to adhere to in a country where church and state are supposed to be separated. These are the founding principles of America. This is what the founding fathers believed in so strongly that they established the United States of America with that separation of church and state. But Christian nationalism is a tried and true tactic to justify war, which enriches men at the top while killing men at the bottom. Now, this war and these justifications have angered a lot of Republicans, especially in the newer alt right segment of the MAGA base, because a lot of them are extremely anti Israel, some because they're anti Semitic. But a lot of them are pushing back against this messaging, regardless of where that sentiment comes from. So, Republican hardliners, those who do support this military intervention, have had to come up with even more out of pocket things to say to justify it. For example, Matt Schlapp, head of the conservative union, which runs CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee. This is what he had to say on Piers Morgan about the deaths of Iranian schoolgirls caused by strikes led by the US and Israel.
Preferred to wait, and now it turns
Yes.
out it was friendly fire from a Kuwaiti pilot who mistook
but
them
Pierce,
for Iranians. So
Pierce,
I just think we
Pierce.
need to get to facts before you
I know,
declare
Pierce. I
that
understand
this
what
was
you're saying.
definitely an Israeli missile.
Pierce, even if it was an Iranian missile that was fired in response to the attack from Israel and the United States, right? Even if it was an Iranian missile, those girls would still be alive today if the United States and Israel had not launched the attack. So you are right. We don't know who launched the missile, but we know that if the US and Israel had not attacked a country that poses no serious threat to them, Israel has hundreds of nuclear weapons, America has thousands, that those girls would be alive.
Okay, but I would also say to that that is indisputable. That it is indisputable to me. Well, hang on, Matt, please. Hang on, please. Let me finish my point. Matt, let me just make the point. You're probably going to make the same point.
So, what you just heard there was a guest on Piers Morgan's show pointing out that these schoolgirls would be alive today if it weren't for the US and Israel's strikes. He's also pointing out that the US and Israel command the exact type of nuclear weaponry that we're accusing Iranians of building. We already have the most advanced military technology in the world. We're the ones with the missiles and the bombs, and we're the ones who keep dropping them and killing thousands of civilians, not just in Iran, but over the past several years in Gaza. And in response to that, Matt Schlapp pipes up to say if those schoolgirls were alive today, they would be in a burqa, suggesting that they're actually better off dead than having to live as Muslim women in Iran. It's the kind of statement and justification that just stops you in your tracks because it's so abhorrent and morally outrageous to posit that young women, girls, children should be killed so that they don't have to wear religious clothing, especially when you consider that under the tenets of Christian nationalism, women and girls are still expected to dress modestly. Most religions enforce standards of modesty on girls and young women, as does our culture at large. Women and girls are constantly told to wear more clothing and cover up in America. In public schools, a lot of girls have to wear shorts at a certain length. Just because we're not enforcing headwear doesn't mean that we live in a less sexist society. And in addition to that, implying that they would have to wear a burqa is not even necessarily true. Perhaps he's confusing the burqa and the hijab, which many women choose to wear of their own volition here in the United States. This type of rhetoric is particularly wild coming from a man who just 2 years ago paid a settlement of almost $500,000 to another man who had accused him of sexual assault. Matt Schlapp denies wrongdoing and he denies that any of this took place, but nonetheless, CNN reported a $480,000 settlement paid to his accuser. And as somebody who has recently reported on how conservative men online treat women who wear the hijab, I find this entire line of rhetoric so degrading and so at odds with misogyny that happens in these conservative spaces, like the Conservative Union, like CPAC. These are the same people who were engaging with Grok, Elon Musk's AI tool. And when I reported on what people were doing with Grok, I found that up to 5% of posts generated back in January were people choosing to either take the hijab off women or put the hijab on women. That's right. Conservatives, when faced with pictures of women wearing revealing clothing, will insert them into an AI generator and ask them to put the hijab on women who they deem as being too slutty or too sexually liberated or too free. And at the exact same time, they want those hijabs taken off Muslim women who put it there by their choice, using their autonomy. But at the end of the day, regardless of your feelings about the hijab, about religious modesty, about standards of modesty and religious clothing in general, you don't liberate anyone by killing them. You do not face systemic sexism by just killing all of the women and girls. It's an absolutely ridiculous idea, as is the idea that Trump was sent by Jesus to liberate us all by dropping bombs in the Middle East. This is the level of discourse we're expected to put up with in the year 2026. It's ridiculous, it's insulting, it's degrading, and above all, it is violent. And nobody who thinks this way should have any influence or sway over decision making of whether people live and die. The last thing I want to end on here is pointing out this comment made by Mehdi Hassan, who posted on Blue Sky that I've spent years, decades, obsessing over the Bush administration's Iraq WMD lies, writing about them, debunking them. For those who don't know, who might be too young to remember, WMD stands for Weapons of Mass Destruction. And that's what George W. Bush claimed Iraq was building and already had, which is why we needed to go to war. But it wasn't true. And it's happening again right now with an even dumber president who says even dumber things and contradicts himself constantly. Because again, I just can't get over the fact that Trump said last year we had already destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities. And now he's saying if we didn't hit within 2 weeks, they would have had a nuclear weapon. When crazy people have nuclear weapons, bad things happen. Oh my gosh, just like how we have a crazy person in the White House right now and crazy things are happening as a result of that. But going back to what Mehdi was saying, he wrote, I can think of no lie about Iraq WMDs told by Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, et al. That comes even close to the enormity and absurdity of this lie from Donald Trump. This is one of the reasons why Trump's own supporters, people like Nick Fuentes, who is a despicable anti Semitic incel, are currently posting that they're going to vote for Democrats because they're so angry about going to war with Iran. And although I don't agree with them on literally anything, they do have a right to be angry about this. We all have a right to be angry about this. Trump ran on a campaign of ending forever wars, not starting another one. The amount of bloodshed that has already occurred, the potential for bloodshed if this conflict continues, is so enormous, so nonsensical, and so despicable, considering that there is absolutely no reason for this to be happening right now. There's no real justification for the US and Israel striking Iran, which is why they have to make them up after the fact and rely on horrible racist, anti Muslim bigotry to do it. This is a story Americans should know all too well because it's the same one we've been hearing for decades. And what did it get us in the end? Nothing, except the money that should have gone to helping people at home went to fighting endless wars in the Middle East. Are we really about to start that cycle again? Or are we all just being held captive by people who believe in things like Armageddon?